Hello, everyone. This is our post-sermon conversation with the preaching ministers at Memorial Drive Church of Christ, Tim Rush and myself, Jason Thornton. And yesterday was Easter Sunday, and Tim had the preaching opportunity yesterday. And we've transitioned out of the rules of engagement and the tactics that the devil uses against us. And now we're talking about our victorious lion and the way that walking with the victorious lion might be surprising to us. Because I think there is a block in many of our minds of, if I'm living in the victory, why does it feel so terrible sometimes? And I think Tim just took tremendous first shot at this in talking about, well, what he's about to tell you. And so, Tim, why don't you kind of sum up what is it that you were communicating yesterday?
Yeah, so yesterday I was thinking about, it started with thinking about the people that would be with us that are worn out and I don't want to just say they were there just because it was Easter Sunday, but that crowd, of course, and the church is just a place of religion. They come to church and they don't find life. And so that just took me down the road of the difference between religion and life in Christ, and that the connection that has to Easter, that there is this call into death, into self-sacrifice that Christ calls us into. And when we join him in his death, we find incredible life. And if we try anything else to bring about life, we're bringing about religion instead of life. And so that was I think that was it in a nutshell, a call for myself and a call for others listening to embrace the cross.
I thought it was tremendously brave of you, Tim, to own, and I'm even questioning, okay, how much is this true? But I feel like the whole message was true. But when you would say, if you come to Memorial Drive and you feel like it's just religion and not life, then basically you were saying, Tim, that you take responsibility for that. Like, you're part of the problem, that you made it religion. And I heard that, and I thought, first of all, very brave to be that confessional and that open, because even in your saying that, you were dying to yourself. In other words, most everyone in power, and why they say power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The reason they say that is because when you have power, you want to maintain and increase that power. You get used to it. And this is true of every human being on earth. Let me say it in a really silly way. When I didn't have a microwave, I didn't miss a microwave. But once I got a microwave, I can remember as a kid, getting a microwave in our house, I would do everything I could to keep that microwave. And that actually does use physical power. But the idea is, once you have a way to make your life better, to make it more effective, to make it more beneficial, you cling to that. Every human being does. Now, we focus on the people that have power over other people. And then those become easy targets, and often because the abuse is so much greater, you know what I mean? But every human wants to maintain their sense of validity, their sense of usefulness and value. So for you to be so just authentic and confessional and say, hey, I'm part of the problem here. And the truth is, I am too. And the truth is, our elders are part of the problem. And the truth is, our leadership in general is part of the problem. That's the operative turnkey, if people are part of Memorial and they're not experiencing life, then we have to continue to ask ourselves, in the power that we've been given in leadership, whether that be positional power or relational power, we need to be asking, what am I doing to create this on my own, versus how am I allowing God's Spirit to work through me to create what God wants, which is life. And there's the tension point. It's a corollary to when we talk about the two chairs, that when you're on the chair that represents God, every resource of God is for you and works through you. But when you're depending on anything else, you're limited to the resources of whatever it is you're depending on. So if I'm depending on me and I get up and I preach and I'm trying to bring life and I'm depending on me, I only have the resources that Jason Thornton has, which is very limited, very, very limited. It may work for a time. It may work for a season, but it will not work long term, because God doesn't work that way. But when I'm connected with God, life comes through me. And that's what you're saying. You just said it in a very direct way, but specifically this idea and that dynamic of God is constantly leading us. Our victorious Jesus, our victorious Lion, is constantly leading us into situations where he's saying, die to yourself so that life can come. And what was interesting to me is you, as you were preaching it, were doing it. There's not a single preacher I know that would say, if I gave him the script, you need to get up and take responsibility if people don't find life at church, and they'd be like, can't wait. They'd be like, hold up, wait a minute. You know what I mean? And I thought that was just a beautiful thing right there. But then you turned and you said, but also, basically you're saying, as I follow Christ, I'm asking you to follow Christ. Because if you come to church and there isn't life there, it's also about you creating something else. And what's interesting is I can say, but I hate religion. But I notice a lot of people, they don't allow God to go there. They just move from loving religion to hating religion. They're actually worshiping, hating religion. There's so many people that worship being a critic. Worship, I'm going to slam the Christians and say bad things on social media or say bad things in my conversation about Christians to make me look better. That's the same abuse of power. It's the same choice not to die to yourself and humble yourself and allow God to bring life. And so this is the irony in all this. But I thought that was just an excellent message.
And just now a plane decides to.
Oh yeah. Well, it's just like yesterday.
One of the things as you prepare for a sermon, so many ideas and thoughts come through, so many different scriptures come up that you're like, ooh, I should look at this one, or I should present this one. But one of the things that just struck me during the week was it's easy to call out church for our dissatisfaction with religion. But we're dissatisfied all over the place. Like there is nothing that we get involved in that we don't become dissatisfied in. And it could be a parent group at school, or it could be a benevolent work. It could be a sports, following a certain team. And the more you get into that group of fans, whatever it is that we start investing in, we get frustrated. And it's because we're dealing with people, and those people are dealing with us, who are people. But there is in church, like, we know what the secret is. The secret is you should die to yourself. And nobody at a St. Louis Cardinal baseball game has the thought, well, I really ought to die to myself. But in church, we know that is going to go a long ways. And we still, like, we've done it. We've done it. And since we did it, we thought, isn't that enough? Isn't it somebody else's turn to die now? Isn't it somebody, what wasn't the last time that I died to myself? Wasn't that sufficient? I got to do it again. And so when I put that on the table for myself, I can look at it and go, oh yeah, that's how I feel. That's what's coming up inside of me, when most of the time I just don't look at it. Most of the time I'm just frustrated or unsatisfied or angry, and I'm not looking at what's going on here versus what should be going on here to diagnose the issue.
Yeah, I think that is really good. And I'm asking myself, where do we get the idea? Like on one hand, hang on, I'm a little out of focus here. Let me see if that helps me. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. My camera's got a mind of its own. But what gives us the idea that on one hand we're like, we want to be just like Jesus, and then in the very next breath, but you won't mistreat me. We want to be just like Jesus, but I better feel comfortable here. We want to be just like Jesus, but you better do things the way I think they should, or I'm going to get all over you. And this is something that's been part of church since, I mean, since my earliest memories of just the idea of, maybe I need to move in. I don't know. Anyway, but just the idea of the of this contradictory nature we take towards Jesus. That on one hand we say I want to be just like Jesus, but then we're the exact opposite of how Jesus was. And I think what we do, and I hear this from people. I hear this from people when they talk about the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus like saying turn the other cheek, and they're like, no, that was to put the other people in the place. That was so you would feel good and powerful. And I'm like, Jesus is constantly telling us to die to ourselves. And I think Christianity in the United States is really, I mean, it's really not doing well. The latest Barna poll says that less than, I think it's 47% of people are not going, 47% of America are saying they're no longer part of a church. That is unbelievable. Like, I think it was 70% were part of a church, even just 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And what I think it is, it's this power thing where we keep trying to make Jesus fit into our power. And it's just, it drives me a little bit insane when I talk to people and they're like, Jesus was an activist. And I'm like, well, let me show you in the Bible how Jesus wasn't an activist. And they're basically like, I don't care what the Bible says. I just know in my heart Jesus was an activist. And I'm like, well, let's see how that works for you. Will that bring more life of you becoming, I mean, and there's activists can mean a billion things, but it's like, is your activism primarily on social media being a critic of everyone? Does that bring you more life? Because Jesus wasn't, you know, and what we do is we take things out of context, and it's always been a church problem, but we look at an interaction with Jesus that was between him and somebody he was really caring about. And he said some hard things like say Jesus to Peter. And then we take that whole get behind me, Satan, and we feel like we can say that to everybody. Anybody I don't like, get behind me, Satan. I may not use those words, but I justify this. And I'm like, Jesus died to himself all the time. And this is the thing. I think when Jesus pushes back against the Pharisees by healing a person, the assumption is Jesus felt great about that. He felt great about creating that tension. He felt like he was a big winner. You know what I mean? I don't think meaning the crowd approved of him and everything was good. I think in most of his interactions, let me put it this way. I think the potential for dissatisfaction for Jesus was extremely high in every interaction he came to. Matter of fact, his potential for dissatisfaction is much higher than ours because he knew what perfection looked like. I would suggest that every single interaction was dissatisfying to Jesus on that human level, but he kept choosing to die to himself. And this is the thing that I don't understand how we justify this in our own hearts, but we have to, if we're really going to be Christ followers. And the irony is the people that say I don't want religion, they're creating their own religion.
Yeah.
It's still the essence of relating to Jesus is you choose to die to yourself every day and you trust him to give you life. And if you're trying to create life in any other way, you're putting up scaffolding. It may not be what's historically called religion, but you're putting up your own scaffolding. And that honesty is critical.
Yeah, I don't know why this verse stuck with me, but and now I can't remember if it's Mark or if it's the end of Luke, where the women go out on Sunday morning to finish preparing Christ's body. And the angel says, why do you look for the living among the dead? And for some reason, that phrase stuck with me kind of in a backward sense. But if you come into church and it's dead, why would you stay? Why would you look for the living among the dead? And so then I'm answering myself, why don't you do something about it? If it is dead, why because I don't think the answer is walk away. Well, it's dead in here, so why look for the living among the dead? I'll go find it somewhere else. You're not going to find it somewhere else. Why not bring life into the place? Instead of complaining, instead of critiquing, why not bring life into the place? And the only way you're going to do that is if you lead by dying. And that is not how I want to work. I want to work where everybody else just agrees with what I think is the best, and this is what we do going forward. Doesn't work that way. And so for me to lead involves me dying. And that's hard. I mean, that is just a hard thing to do.
It is. And the thing, there's a difference between, this is what I was getting after and what I have some energy around. It's not acknowledging, man, I need to die to myself and it's hard. What bothers me is saying, I refuse to acknowledge that I need to die to myself. I refuse to acknowledge that as part of walking with Jesus. And I'm like, that's the fundamental part of Christianity that is so repulsive to people. And people don't know how to say it, but it's this idea of the whole world offers a way to get more power. I mean, every commercial is saying, if you have our product, you'll get more power, in some aspect of your life. And so Christ's appeal was, I have access to all the power in the world and I am not using it for myself. I'm not. And I don't know why that doesn't hit me between the eyes more, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? Because I subconsciously am always trying to figure out, how do I use my power to make my life better? And understand, I don't think we need to be thinking, how do we use our power to make our life worse? I think we do need to be thinking, how do I take whatever power I have and lay it down for the sake of others? Because if we're going to say we're Christ followers, we're Christians, and we're not doing that, we need to say, I'm actually not a Christian. I want to be saved, but I have no desire to walk with Jesus in this. I have no desire to die to myself. I have a desire for you to validate my opinions and make me feel comfortable about things. And I'm telling you, that right there, that last statement, I just, sadly, I think that's an extreme statement in Christianity today. And I just think that's the piece. And now I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting I'm good at it. I'm just saying that is a hard thing to own. That's just, if I'm going to say I'm with Jesus, that's just part of the process. That is part of it, and I can't get away from it.
Okay, so here's another verse that played into my thinking, and think about the context there of, where is it that you find power? Where is it that you come alongside other groups of people and you feel like this is our groundswell of power? And so then I think ideology, where does it flow? What is it that fills me with strength and makes me feel like I make a difference in the world? And so then listen to Jesus. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brother and sisters, yet even his own life, he cannot be my disciples. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. When I read that, and man, I don't know if this is too much of a leap, but when he says, hate your mother and your father, or you can't be my disciple, it connected with me of the other things in our life that we allow to feed us, allow to give us our energy, our purpose, and that word ideology. That for Jesus to look at us and say, you have to hate your ideology in comparison to how much you love me. And man, it makes sense, because it feels like there is a dividing line between, what do you think about this issue? What do you think about this? And if you don't agree, you might as well get up and leave the table, because nothing can be shared anymore. And Christ is saying, you really need to hate it. You should hate it. and pick up your cross and follow me.
Yeah, that is so good. And that hate there, like you said, that's the comparative. I remember Richard Rogers saying, if there was I had a friend who was a female, and all of a sudden I realized she was trying to come between Barbara, his wife. She was trying to come between Barbara and I would have incredibly strong negative emotions towards her suddenly. And we have to realize that the devil wants to manipulate every relationship. And I think this happens all the time in churches where they're like, yeah, I think the Bible teaches this, but my grandpa wouldn't agree, or my dad wouldn't agree, my mom wouldn't agree. And so I won't even allow myself to think about what God might be teaching me here. I'm going to go with grandpa. Well, that verse applies to that situation, that you are loving grandpa more than God himself. And I think that's easy for me to see because I see that, but what am I doing? You know what I mean? Where do I need to die? Do I love my comfort? Do I love my job? Do I love my friends? Do I love my more than God? You know, and many times you don't notice that until hard choices come up, you know, and so that's where we're kind of blind to it a lot until some situation comes up. But I think that the key here to me is when we see a passage like that, especially if we struggle with it, it isn't that, man, I got to figure out how this applies. You know, although I think that's a good goal, the key is, God, I don't know what to do with this, but I know it's for me. I know you're for me. And so can you help me see how this applies in my life? I don't just say, I'm just not going to study that verse anymore. I run into people pretty frequently that basically signal, if I bring up a hard passage, they're like, I'm just not going to think about the passage anymore. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's your right, but God wants to call you into something deeper. And so I think our response, I don't think we should pretend we know how to do it, or we pretend to know how it applies, but to say, okay, God, teach me this. What is it you want to teach me? And just staying open to the way he does that. But it is a very hard teaching. And it's especially hard because we were born into affluence. You know, we were born into the belief that we could solve most of our problems. We really don't need God for most things. I make my money. I buy my food. I get my medical care. I cultivate and pursue my friendships. You know what I mean? The relationships make me feel good. Now we understand that I have nothing. Like, I don't even have breath in my body without God. I don't have thoughts in my brain without God. You know, but we kind of can lull ourselves into this thing. We really don't need God that much, you know? And it's because of our affluence, which is why many times you'll find much deeper faith and deeper poverty, especially in culturally deep poverty, where you have a whole culture in deep poverty. And that's not elevating poverty. Although James says those that are poor should, be proud of their high position. So I don't know how that all applies. But anyway, but I think that's why it's so hard, is the norm is to find your comfort and hold on to it with all you got, you know? And so we feel so alien by saying, I'm going to die to myself, and I'm asking you to die to yourself too. That just feels like that's way too much to ask.
Yeah, I always think about, I think it's funny that my personal dress style, as a kid, I thought, why do my parents not dress cool? You know, and in my mind, they could afford it. You know, I couldn't, but they could afford to dress however they want. Why do they not dress cool? And thinking, when I get older, I will dress stylish. And then I hit my comfort zone that included cargo pants and t-shirts, and styles kept evolving, and I was comfortable. So can I just please keep wearing cargo pants and t-shirts? There's a certain Colombian shirt, and there are all sorts of companies that make the knockoff version, all the same. So comfortable. My kids aren't a fan. Kim is not a fan. So comfortable. And I could live there forever. And some of them, honestly, they don't look good, but so comfortable. And I feel like that's where we get with religion, and not even we get there with religion, we get there with God, where there is something that happens that, oh my goodness, we found our sweet spot. And maybe it was where we felt the most drawn into God, or we maybe it wasn't even us recognizing God. Maybe we just felt the most community that we'd ever felt, and it was with God people. And so we found our comfort zone. And my goodness, don't let us ever change. Let us now build our scaffolding around that moment, around that feeling. And I think, and I'm mixing illustrations here, but do you remember those years before you have kids, when you're with your friends all the time? Maybe like you're single, then you're married, but you're with all your people that none of them have kids yet. So you've all got unlimited time. And then one by one, friends start having kids and you don't see them as much. And eventually you're mid 20s, 30s, and you miss your buddies from age 22 because you don't have that sort of friendship that you used to have. And if, so I'm combining those two illustrations to say, when we had something great, we want to go back there. And I think sometimes we connect God with those friendships at 22, if they were godly friendships, because we were experiencing a community that was really special and unique. And not everybody had that. So they may miss this illustration altogether. But we want to keep recreating something that God gave us. And so Jesus said, hey, if you want to be my disciple, don't put your hand to the plow and then keep looking back. Don't keep trying to figure out, how did we do this? How, or that nostalgic feeling of what was so great about. He said, you're not fit for the kingdom if you keep looking back. And I think God, like, that's a piece of picking up our cross, is moving forward. Stop asking, how did we do this? How did that work? Why did I feel so good? And look ahead to, where is he leading us? What is he drawing us to? With the belief that he's going to provide what we need down that road.
Yeah, I could do a lot of, we could talk a lot about nostalgia and how it's a life killer. It is a church killer. Nostalgia is not of God. A matter of fact, if you look, and I feel like I say this every time we record, but God is anti-precedent and humans are precedent addicted. We are addicted to, how do we do this last time? Because we don't want to get it wrong, and we want to be successful, and we want to save more time so we can do more stuff. But God is always changing it up. And it's the church that said, no. We want to be first century. So we're going to meet in a room in a building we own, which is absolutely not first century. And we're going to meet on Sunday, which there's no record of them meeting specifically on Sunday versus all the other days. We kind of have to piecemeal that together. And then we're going to say, well, it's got to happen in this certain way. And now we're just like Jesus. And I'm like, there's no record of Jesus ever being part of what you're describing, like, ever. But I think we think of a time that our life or our church was really good, and we worship that, and God's like, I want to do a new, why? I want to do a new thing that's even better. And we're like, but what about, and I think that's just a killer.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to go into something. Well, you tried this a few years back to reorganize classes, and it wasn't going to be classes. Have an experiential, what would you call that? We have our worship service, then we have this unpacking of it.
Yeah.
And it's just too hard for people to imagine what that might look like, because they've never experienced that before. And when you're asked to prove it, yeah, you don't want to do it because you've never seen it before, and I can't prove it because you won't step into it with me now.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, and the thing is, I'm like that all the time. One of the things I want to kind of shift gears, because I want to get to this before we're done here, is the payoff. So I die to myself, what's the payoff? And I want to present it, I'll present my thought like this. When I worked with AIM, so we're traveling with 40 to 50, maybe even 60 to 70, 20 somethings who are really passionate about Christ and are really tuned in, probably more than any other time in their life, in serving others, in loving others, in dying to themselves. You know, I'm not suggesting they do it 100%. I'm just saying they're really tuned in. So when we come to town, especially to a small church, it's amazing, you know, for them. And the reason I know it's amazing is we heard year after year after year, it's so amazing, man. We're so grateful. And people, we'd be there for 24 hours and the people be crying when the group left. You know, I mean, it was just such a deep impact. But I realized we'd be in the middle of these worship times, which were very intense and beautiful, you know, and I had become numb to them. I had ceased to find life. And I remember there was one particular time that this person was really overwhelmed, like emotionally, in a beautiful way. It's just a beautiful experience for them. And they're sharing with me, man, this is so amazing. And how amazing must this be to be around it all the time? And I realized I have stopped dying to myself. Because what happens is once you get used to something, you start becoming a critic of how good it could be. And usually what you're saying is, here's the way it was. It's almost like you have this amalgamation. Like one time we sang this song that sounded this way. I want to replace that. And then one time this guy made some comments and they went this way. And I want to include that. And you're without even knowing, you're creating this perfect scene that you're comparing to everything. And you're not allowing there to be new because you're trying, especially if I had any control, I kept trying to control it to where I thought it should go. You know what I mean? Well, that's the opposite of God being in control. But when I go in, even on any given Sunday morning, oftentimes I will sit down, and especially when we have singing first, I would be like, just not of the singing necessarily, but I'd be in the room going, oh, what is it? Why am I here? And da 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 da, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, wait a minute, we're singing songs to God. I have an opportunity to join that with my heart and my mind. And here's what happened every time. Every time I'd be like, God, I'm sorry. I just want to be here with you. I just want to be here. I just want to say these words and mean them and make a choice. Do I mean them? And listen to the sermon or get up and preach. But I just want to be here with you and your people. And life would always happen. I would always notice something that was right in front of my face beforehand, but I couldn't see it. And that's what I would ask for all Christ followers to seriously consider, is that their choice not to die to themselves in small ways or big ways, it actually takes away life. But if you would trust God, that when you have this strong opinion or you have this thing that really is dissatisfying to you, stop in that moment and just say, God, I just want to be with you. You're the only one that gives life. There's no way all of my frustration and cynicism and criticism can bring life. I just want to be with you. You're the one that brings life. And watch and see if there's not life that comes out of that. Now, what may happen is you may be in such a pattern of being a cynic and a critic and this kind of thing that it's going to take you 10 to 12 times to really mean those words you're saying. You know, it may take you a while, but man, put in that time so that you can see that, because there's tremendous beauty. There's tremendous, for lack of a better term, payoff for this. And it's not just when we die. I mean, it's as we go. You will start to see life differently if you're in the practice of dying to yourself in these areas.
Man, that's so that goes back to the rules of engagement. The first thing was you were aware. You were aware of your critique, and you drew near to God. I mean, that's just I love how that's illustrated there. And it makes me want to bring up, I loved a couple weeks ago when you talked about pride and you started with critique, and how when we were critiquing other things, what we were saying is, I could do this better. And man, I feel like that has really stuck with me because I live there. I don't call it pride. I call it, I don't know what I call it, but it's pride. It's my critiquing nature of, if I were the one in charge here, this would be done a whole lot better. Man, that message has just really stayed with me.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll tell you, and it's this thing too. it's like, it is a really brave new world. Like I say this to people all the time at Memorial who are maybe down on themselves, you know, I will say to them, I will say, hey, so let's say they're 40 years old. I would say, if your 20-year-old self, well, if you really want to get to it, if your 15-year-old self walked in here, are you any different than that person? Immediately they're like, oh, yeah. I said, do you think that person would drive you crazy? Do you think you'd notice all kinds of immaturity and maybe even ugliness in that person that you don't even remember doing? And they, oh yeah. I've just never talked to a person that was like, nope, I was more mature at 15 than I am now. Now they may say they were more innocent. They may say didn't know all the pain they were going to go through. But in terms of growth, there's no comparison. And I think that's what we have to keep in front of us, that, okay, so I'm at 50, but what will I say about my 50-year-old self when I'm 70?
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to look back on my 50-year-old self and say, man, I kept growing and I am so much more mature. Man, my 50-year-old self would have wore me out, but man, I'm so grateful. And what that means is, if you've grown, you've died to yourself. That's the key to growth. That's where he says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind, because this leads to this, and this leads to this, and this leads to maturity, growth. And that's the thing is, whoever's listening, you've already died to yourself. Heck, if you listen this far into this recording, you've died to yourself. You've already died to yourself, you know, or else you would have no more maturity. But don't get stuck. Don't stop. Don't say, well, I've died to myself enough. If you're 90 years old, die to yourself today, you know, because that's how God brings life and growth.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
All right. Outstanding. Always love it.
Yep. Yep.
Well, have a good week.
Yeah. I look forward to this Sunday, more victorious lion.
Yes, we're dealing with a little bit different aspect, but it still draws off of it. It builds off of what you said Sunday, what you said yesterday, is just that idea of, when we die to ourselves, what's that going to feel like? And how does God think about that?
Very good.
Very good.
All right.
All right.
Love you, man.
See ya.